Okay, beloved, so I want to share with you in this video a little bit about my personal story and why I love to teach about wealth, why I love to teach about sexual energy and sexual healing. And it's very much tied to my own personal story, yeah? So I grew up in Christianity where I was taught to be afraid of my sexuality. I was taught sex is a sin. I was even taught that masturbation is like having sex with Satan. So if you can imagine college Aya self-pleasuring and then so much guilt and so much shame and so much fear, yeah? So much so that by the time that I was an adult and coming out of the church, I was completely disconnected from my pleasure. Orgasms were like a distant, far off dream. And I had so much contraction and fear when it came to my sexuality. And so then as an adult, I found myself in this beautiful, loving 5-year partnership where everything was so magical and beautiful except for our sex life. And after years of struggling with this and after years of feeling like, okay, there's more to the sexuality thing, I need to figure out how to heal myself, I found myself going to a sexual healer for the first time who worked internally in the body with G-spot stimulation and squirting in particular. And as you can imagine, having a Christian background, I had all kinds of hangups around that. Fears of, oh my God, I hired a stripper. Fears of, oh my God, am I cheating on my partner, even though I'm doing this with his permission? You know, and it really took a point of desperation before I was even willing to even think about physical body work that had any kind of a sexual connotation. Since then, my views on that have changed and shifted drastically, as you can imagine. But at the time, it was a really, really big deal. And I remember sitting before the sexual healer on the very first day of my session, and he looked at me and said, Aya, why are you here? And I was like, well, I really thought that I was here to heal my relationship with my partner. I really thought that I was here because I'd love to experience orgasm one day in my life. And I really thought I was here because I teach on embodiment and movement, and yet this is one part of my life, one part of my being that I feel so contracted around, that I feel so distant from. And all I can think about right now in this moment, though, is the fact that my bank account is tanking, my business is close to zero, my inspiration and creativity feel all dried up, and somehow I feel like it's connected to this block around my sexuality. Am I crazy? And he kind of chuckled. And I really don't remember exactly what he told me next, but what I do know is that it created the foundation of what I know now to be my lived experience, which is that our sexual energy is pure life force. It is the thing that makes me uniquely and brilliantly and vibrantly alive. It's what I create everything in my life, a physical, literal human child, if I decide to go that route in this lifetime. But even if I don't decide to be a mother in the physical sense, I birth my businesses, my creative projects, my communities, my relationships, my home. All of that comes through this vibrant sexual energy that I hold. And I know that to be my lived experience today, because what happened next in that session really completely just blasted through every conception of what I had around my sexuality, every conception I had around the amount of pleasure that I could feel, every conception that I had around who I was as a person. Being someone who had very little access to pleasure, for sure, I was like, for sure, I'm never gonna squirt during the session. That's not gonna happen. I just don't even think my body can do that, right? And instead, what happened for me was that I squirted and squirted and squirted buckets and buckets and buckets by the end of the session. And it felt like this giant purge of all of this old stories and shame and guilt and fear around my sexuality. And I remember laying on that massage table at the end of the session, feeling all of this energy moving through my body, places that were asleep for a very long time. I didn't know that I had the capacity to feel so much sensation and so much moving through me. And What happened next was that I went home, started to work on my business with fresh new eyes. After that, I sold out back-to-back retreats, got inspiration for a whole new offering that I hadn't ever offered before. In my slow season, my business did way more sales than it had during the entire busy season. And since that time, my business has always stayed in this thriving range, right? And it's like the moment that I was able to touch in with this life force that is in me, everything changed. Not only was I more financially abundant, was my business more successful, but I felt like I was living closer to my purpose and remembering more of who I am. So this is why I am so incredibly passionate about helping women and men rediscover their connection to their sexual energy as life force. Because for such a long time, I believed that the only way that I was limiting myself by not diving into my sexual healing was orgasms and good sex. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. Yeah, when I started down my healing path, absolutely, I started to have orgasms. And the amount of pleasure that I could receive, more and more and more than I could ever imagine was possible in my lifetime. And that's still happening today. That even though I have a huge capacity for pleasure, I'm still constantly blowing myself out of the water, so surprised at how much more there is, right? Our pleasure is like this unending well of goodness and deliciousness. The more that we dive into it, the more there is. So I got the orgasms and the good sex in spades, and like more and more and more all the time. But what was even more important was how much deeper I was able to connect with my own inner creatrix, my own inner magician, and how much more every part of my life started to thrive as a result of me starting down this path. So if this is a part of your life that's been calling to you, if you've been feeling the energy of your womb, your yoni, your lingam calling to you, I urge you to listen, to answer that call, to start this work for yourself, because it will change every single thing about your life. You will discover parts of yourself that you didn't know that you could ever experience. And there will be a new sense of aliveness and vibrancy and inner radiance that comes through you that is just priceless. And I would be so, so, so honored to support you on that path.